Ring ring, it's time for another episode of Crossplay Conversations, the show where we dive deep into the world of video games while keeping it light. I'm your host, Luke Lewis, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, the sneaker savant, Joseph Hooper.
What's up, guys? I feel like sneaker savant. Let me just pull out a sneaker.
You keep saying it's like not an appropriate title, but then I see shoe boxes. I say, look at those shoes. Those are clean. Those are great.
Alma Meniere Jordan 3s.
Woo!
All right. This is these are made in honor of women. All right. This is technically a women's shoe, but it's also unisex. So this is one of my favorite shoes. I'll show another shoe next time, so I can live up to that title.
Quick shoe take. I feel like women's Nike shoes often have cooler colors. Is that a thing? Which, like, I mean, all good, gender equality, support women. But I want some of those shoes.
I will say women have some nice shoes. I think women often get shafted, all right? Because there's a lot of shoes that are just men's shoes that don't have enough size runs in the smaller size.
Okay.
All right, so step it up, Nike. What are we...
Yeah, on both
every
ends,
shoe should just be unisex.
I mean, that's more what I'm getting at, of just like everybody have all the colors.
Yeah, let's pick it up. I mean, sure, you can have like a women's themed shoe every now and again, but let's get bigger size runs, all right? Why are we running out of Jordan 1 Spider-Man Chicago's, all right? Can we please just add some more, please?
I mean, I'm used to that, given the fact that I have like 7.5 baby men's feet, and Nike doesn't carry like anything smaller than an 8 in stores, so I have to special order my Air Maxes or my Air Force Ones.
And that third voice you hear with his baby men's feet
yeah,
is our third chair. The gang is back together. You know him as the host of many a panel and many a podcast, one of which you can find on giantbomb.com. It's the business boy, Jacob McCourt.
Hello, yeah, I have a... Can you call me the Wii U Wonder Kid? I feel like that's the new moniker I want to be known as.
Okay, Wii U Wonder Kid.
I know you're not supposed to like make your own nickname, but I feel like that's the one that I want.
Employ whatever you want. Yes.
Do we need props in this episode? Because I came prepared with my play date that I want to show off that I just got.
Very cute.
Yeah, impressions. I guess.
What a
maybe
cute
in a future episode.
Sure. Yeah, I'm down. I played it at PAX. I was pleasantly surprised at the depth. Like,
yeah, I've played it for 5 minutes so far.
Yeah.
So I'll let you know soon how I feel about it.
Right on. How you guys doing? I feel like it's been a hot minute since I think this is the first episode where all three back together after PAX. Been doing lots of things, staying busy, but how we doing?
Good. I'm getting ready for a move. I've been traveling a bunch, and now I'm going to hopefully nest a little bit and get ready for this move, but rip for me to do a move in the winter, I guess. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I thought about that. The winter.
Is that bad or? Like,
in Canada, like I live in basically the Florida of Canada, but still, like there's a chance there may be snow when I move in December, and the thought of that makes me want to die.
Yeah, fair enough. On my side, we all know, or us boys know. I have a job. All right. I wish I could be playing video games all day and doing video game coverage, but I have a job, and that job really is squeezing every little bit of juice out of this body that it can get. So I've been working a lot. I've been having a lot of friends visiting and all that stuff since PAX. So not a lot of rest time, not a lot of gaming time. So I'm going to definitely try and claw some of that back heading into December when I don't have a move. But we're surviving.
Love it. Luke, you good? How you feeling?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Playing a lot of games, which we'll get into. Trying to stay busy, fighting that unemployment fight and job front. If any listeners out there have any contacts, hit me up. I'm available, but making the most of it, enjoying it. So that said, though, there've been just too many video games happening. So we are doing a little bit of an indie review roundup today to talk about a slew of fantastic titles that we've been playing, because we just couldn't pick one. There's otherwise things get lost in the shuffle. We got a lot of great games to play. So I feel like, I don't know if y'all feel the same, but this gaming season, I feel like I am driving a car on the freeway full steam ahead, and like pedestrians are throwing games at my car, and they're like, you would like this title, you would like this game, this is totally up your alley, and I'm just like, I'm moving. I can't even stop to think about what you're doing. So that said,
This is
Yes.
our first derailment of the podcast.
Oh,
First
here we
time.
go.
My car's still going, but you're like dragging. You're holding on to the back.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull us to a stop here. This is kind of like a topic within a topic. It's not off topic. So this year has been incredible for games, and I would say mostly the best of the best in terms of studios that we know in terms of like the top trend-setting studios have basically brought their A game this year. We're talking Respawn with Jedi Survivor. We're talking Starfield, Spider-Man coming up. I feel like similarly though, on the indie front, it's been a little quieter. Like even my favorite indie game thus far, Dave the Diver. We'll talk about Cocoon in a second, but Dave the Diver was absolutely my favorite indie game by a mile.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like didn't stay in the conversation as much as we typically would see. Like, I mean, to be fair, Stray, I think it was last year. Was it Stray last year? Stray came out last year, and that like took over the conversation. I don't think Stray would have had a chance this year. How do you guys think? Do you guys think this is just like, hey, there's just so much competition that it was just kind of like not the best year for an indie game to steal the spotlight? Do you think that this trend is going to continue, or do you think that next year indie games are probably going to start filling in the gaps a little more again with Silk Song allegedly, hopefully
that's never coming out.
Year, maybe.
It's coming out. I'm just not going to put any date predictions on it. I'm done with that anymore. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just curious, like, can indies kind of claw back some of the hype and interest that they have in the past next year?
It's a good question. I think for me, I just feel like indies and AAAs can kind of do their own thing, and that's okay. And I don't need indies to have like the same level of like a marketing presence or like presence in the zeitgeist that some of these AAA games have. But I will say there have been several really solid indie games that have stood the test of time for me this year, and I feel like did get a pretty big support marketing push from the big major publishers. I'm thinking about like Venba with ID at Xbox. I'm thinking about we're going to be talking about Goodbye Volcano High on this episode that had a big presence at PlayStation through their different events over the years. I think it was first revealed at a PlayStation showcase way back in the day a couple of years ago. But things like that I think are kind of bringing more indie games to the forefront. But I hear what you're saying of like there haven't been, we talked about this on an earlier episode of the show, but like that generation defining title. But I do think, not to spoil things, but I do think Cocoon is one to talk about and one that will be a part of conversations for a long time to come. So put in the feelers out for that one.
I'm going to set some more alley-oops for Jacob to kind of pick up from what Luke said, right?
Hit me, brother. Hit
adding
me.
on to what I said, right? I want to make it clear to everyone, I've played some great indie games this year. I haven't played as many as I would have liked. But I do think that by the end of it, Sea of Stars will be one that sticks with me for a long time. I'm already loving that game. Cocoon for sure. But, and that's a big but, although I agree with you, Luke, that indie games and AAA games are their own spaces, I do think that the indie game space in general does need their poster childs every year to kind of keep the eyes and keep people interested in looking around in that space. I think, for example, like Celeste and Inscription last year really had people interested in the indie game space, and they play this and they're like, what else is out there? And unfortunately, some of my favorite games, indie games, are some that just kind of fell by the wayside. And I talk about Chained Echoes, which I think got a lot of praise within the industry from people who played it in December, which it released, which, you know, do what you need to do, but I am so
don't launch
sad
in
that
December.
game.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
don't do it.
That might be one of my favorite games, period. And nobody kind of talks about it because it just kind of came at a bad time. So I'm very curious if we kind of find these moments for the poster children to pop back up next year, because even though a lot of the Venba is great, you know, Cocoon's great, I think by the end of the year, that indie conversation is going to be trounced by Baldur's Gate versus Tears of the Kingdom, and there's not really going to be anybody to be the face of indie games this year. I don't know, Jacob.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of factors that I think about when I think of why this year every major publisher wanted to dump a AAA game in this space. I think there were a lot of COVID delays in production that we still don't really talk about. I think I don't work at a publisher, but I'm assuming we're almost through the woods about COVID production delays. So maybe that's why every game publisher wanted to dump their biggest titles here. I think for the Switch, we're approaching the end of its life cycle, so Nintendo needed to specifically dump their big ones this year. But then I think of like how indies could resurge, and I think there's a couple of factors there to keep in mind. There's been a bunch of layoffs in major publishers. Look at what Epic did, laying off 16% of their workforce this week. Where do those people go? They may go to other studios. But when interest rates are very high, there's likely not investment happening in large developers. That's probably the time in my mind where people go and they start their own thing. So I don't necessarily know if next year's the year where we see a bunch of new stuff, but there could be a wave of new indie developers that come out 2 or 3 years from now that decide to make the next Inside, the next Inscription, the next the next Sea of Stars. But I think the last thing I'll say is Unity and their questionable decision making may cause problems for these developers as they have to retool and think about new engines as well. So, Joseph, I just gave you a word soup that was not the answer. I guess in short,
I got the answer out of there.
I think indies are going to be stronger next year, but I think we're going to get stronger indies 2 or 3 years from now.
I agree. I think there's been this weird timing thing where everybody, AAA and indie included, have basically reached their limit in terms of we cannot delay this game any longer. Typically, indies can kind of slot themselves around in the year depending on what's releasing. AAA games too typically have their own cadence, but a lot of the AAA games that we're finally seeing now have either been delayed internally, been delayed publicly, and a lot of the indie games, like Jacob said, with their investments and stuff, I think the clock is really ticking on times of investors wanting their investment back. So I think it's kind of just hey, time's up for everybody, not just indies, not just AAA. The whole industry needs their money back. They need their pockets filled, which is why you see the layoffs, because of all of these kind of rent and stew type moments for every studio. So I think the clock resets, hopefully in 2024. Clock resets hey, I think investors are still going to be demanding their money for games that have been in development for quite some time. But when the clock resets in 2024, hopefully the expectations on these timelines and projects kind of aligns with that, so we don't have such a strict cadence where it all kind of falls on top of each other the same year.
Sometimes I feel like I'm the only guy who talks about interest rates and how it affects the games industry. I feel like friggin' Michael Pachter sometimes, but truly, a lot of the investment comes when debt is cheap, and debt is no longer cheap, right? So I think that we're due. I mean, think about even some of the moves that Epic has made with respect to exclusive publishing rights for games like Remedy's games, and they had an exclusive publishing arrangement with Playdead as well. Those are weird low cost bets that they can make, but in a world where money's expensive to get, is it a bet they make? I don't think it is.
Yeah. All right. Enough of that. Oh, wait. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Luke. Luke is actually.
No, you're fine. Well, no, I was just going to say, Jacob, it's interesting too that you bring up the points of the impact of COVID, and now we're seeing this push to get releases out, and then I think we're going to see the other end of that spectrum of mid next year to next fall. I think we're going to see a lot of games delayed to the following year, a lot of games not coming out, and it's going to be that dead zone ripple effect of all the projects that were started in pre-production amidst COVID, I think, are now going to be several years out. But yeah, it's the business end of things is obviously not my expertise, but it is interesting to consider these layoffs in the lens of man, a lot of these companies are just trying to make their P&Ls look good for the next quarter, and then they're going to ramp production up early next year again, and just hate to see people's lives getting played with in this way. But
Epic is a privately held company also.
Yeah,
Epic,
weird, man.
yeah, that's a whole episode in and of
weird.
itself, but
Yeah.
fucking crazy. I'd love to segue into talking about this release schedule idea. My icebreaker question for today, like we said, there have been a ton of great games coming out this year, but I was curious, looking back, do you have any other years that compare in terms of like crazy number of releases, whether it's AAA, whether it's indie, just to kind of think about, like we're saying, this like pre-post pandemic, how do things stack up this year? Joseph, I saw you had a point. Hit me with it.
I think me and Arsene did an episode on like the best video game year of all time, and I think we're looking at 2017 is one of the big years. We had Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Persona 5, Undertale, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove, and other stuff in that year. I remember that being like a pretty big year. And then also, I think 2013, I can't remember what came out that year, but
that would have been Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah, it's also a banger year.
Couple other ones. How about for you, Jacob?
Yeah, since I'm a little bit older, I always go back to 2007 as the year, and that one would have been the year where BioShock launched, Assassin's Creed launched, Crackdown, Crysis, Mass Effect, Portal, Rock Band, Skate, The Darkness, The Witcher, Uncharted, Mario Galaxy, Metroid Prime 3. Like, that's the year where I think about.
It's a good year.
And I think 2023 doesn't, like, hit that one, but it gets really damn close. I think 2023, at least in the last 10 years, is like the year for video games where I think like, damn, I don't know what's going to win at the Game Awards. And not to say like the Keeleys is a thing that I use as an anchoring device to say, is this year good? But not knowing what the game of the year is there sort of to me says, yeah, it's a banger year for video games.
Yeah. And it's kind of the opposite of like, I think about 2019 as an interesting year as far as like, I didn't know what was going to win that year either. But in a sense that like, nothing was really like, there wasn't like a thing that was head and shoulders above everything else. Like there were some great games, Control's great, Jedi Fallen Order, other titles, but like nothing was like, this is definitely going to take it all. And I feel the same about this year. I'd throw out 2018 as my personal pick between Spider-Man, PS4, Red Dead Redemption 2, Celeste, Dead Cells. Those were some of my like still favorite games of all time. But I think to your point, Jacob, like it's hard to argue against 2007 rather, because how many like original IPs or like first entries of crazy influential series happened that year? So that's definitely a big one.
I'm going to bring up a tweet from CG Danny B, who I've become a big fan of in the last 2 months. He's an indie game streamer.
Nice.
He brought his predictions for Game Awards Game of the Year.
Okay.
Tears of the Kingdom, Starfield, Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core or Final Fantasy 16, Dave the Diver or Sea of Stars, Spider-Man 2. So even looking at that list, at least 3 of those are very probably a Game of the Year contender. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Banger year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, heck yeah.
We're in for a treat, man. We're in for a treat.
Speaking of treats, let's talk about some recent game releases that we've been playing.
So
we have 4 titles that we'll be talking about today. Kicking things off, let's talk about Cocoon. Joseph, do you want to kick things off? I feel like of the 3 of us, this was one that you were like, this game's not going to have the sauce. Don't forget to play this game. Cocoon.
Yeah. So
what did you think now that you've gotten a chance to play it?
Yeah, so I'll give the backstory, right?
Yeah, please.
So for me, one of my favorite types of games is the Inside Limbo Little Nightmare style game where you are playing, you are solving puzzles, and you don't quite know the story until you complete the game. Like that's my favorite part, where I am kind of dropped in this world and everyone involved in the game, every NPC, every character you play as knows what's going on, but you as a player don't really understand until you complete the game and kind of get the final picture. I love those games, and I was very scared that it would be a while before we had that same kind of experience captured again, because the Playdead studio kind of broke up and Little Nightmare studio got the rights got purchased by Bandai Namco or something or got sold. I don't know. But it was kind of dicey where I was like, man, like two of my favorite franchises / developers, who knows what's going to happen with them. So we got 2 announcements. All right. We got Somerville, which came first from a former Playdead's developer. And I believe they were more of like the lead character artist or lead artist on the Inside Limbo games. So I was like, okay. I was very excited for that. Played that last year, but it didn't quite hit what I needed to. Like the visuals were pretty much there, but the overall vision was kind of lacking. So I was kind of disappointed. I was like, bum, man. Like we're not getting back to those heights that we hit before. And then got another announcement. Cocoon from another former Playdead developer. And this person was, I think, the lead gameplay designer. So kind of light bulbs started going off in my head. I was like, wait a second, lead gameplay designer. All right, now we're kind of talking. All right, like we might not have the same visual identity as some of like the other games, but lead gameplay designer is exactly what I wanted to hear. Now, looking at the trailers is just kind of trippy nonsense, I would say. Like you kind of get an idea of, oh, you're kind of jumping in worlds, out of worlds type situation, puzzle solving, but it's not, you don't really get a good vision of what the game is. So I was just kind of crossing my fingers and hoping my hype would deliver. The game is out, spoiler alert, which is why we're talking about it. It's pretty short, probably 3 to 4 hours or something like that, maybe 5 hours to 100%. And the verdicts are in. I love this game. This game does absolutely capture that vibe that the original Limbo games capture, that somewhat of the Little Nightmares kind of style captures. And I am delighted to know that there is now a new studio on the map that has this special type of genre on lock for hopefully the next couple years. So kind of just quickly going into high level points of what I loved about this game is like the puzzles are, I think, masterclass design where it's not necessarily about breaking the player down and having them solve the most difficult puzzle. It's not necessarily involved in like, oh, like we're making this easy, we're going to guide you through this. It's just like the perfect balance of difficulty and exposing you to mechanics and kind of like walking and holding your hand through this, what I would describe as a theme park, Disney theme park experience of a puzzle game where it's like, okay, like you're walking and okay, you can pull on this thing and this thing does one thing and we're going to teach you that this thing does one thing. And then we're going to take you to this thing and this thing warps you and it does this thing. And we're going to teach you very clearly that these things do these things. And then we're going to put it all together and we're going to kind of break your brain on how these things work together, but not in a, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go situation. It's just kind of like, oh, shoot, like this is crazy. Like,
oh man, I didn't know this game could do this.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I think that's really the bread and butter of this game. And I do love like the bigger themes and kind of like the hidden story that's being told as you play as well. But just the way the game guides you through the experiences that they have crafted and like perfectly demonstrates, hey, like this is why we're in our bag. This is why this is what the former Playdead developer moniker means. Was fantastic. I didn't see any glitches. I didn't see any frustrations. No, like, oh, what the heck? This isn't, I think this should work this way, but it's not. None of that. Just simply, all right, I see the puzzle. Can I solve it? No, I think I can solve it. Just give me more time. And that's really all I can ever ask for a puzzle game. Over.
Yeah, for sure. How about for you, Jacob?
Yeah, so I finished this one as well. I played it in 2 sittings, which is normally not the type of, I'm not that guy, but I was so enamored by the game design. There are very few games that I can think of that are as well designed as this one, where, like Joseph said, you will at many points just learn by doing. It's a 1-button game. It's literally like cross on PlayStation, A on Xbox, and everything that you need to do is done with that single button. And it teaches you what you need to know, but the only time where your brain never breaks is those moments, exactly as you said, where, Kyle Stevenson explained the core mechanic of the orbs in this by calling it like a Russian nesting doll, where you essentially travel between.
Like that.
And this is in the trailer, so it's not really a huge spoiler, but I'll be very careful about how much I say here, but essentially, like, you will go between different worlds by traveling in orbs, and at one point in the game, no, I'm not going to go there. It just gets really interesting, and anytime that you don't really know where you're supposed to go next, it's because you just have to like take a 1-inch leap in logic to go, oh, if this orb does this or this mechanic does this, can I put it together with this other mechanic? And the answer is always yes. So I think 3 times I needed to look up a walkthrough, it was because I didn't realize I could smash 2 like well-designed gameplay elements together. It's very story light, but I was okay with it because this thing is a masterclass in game design. Luke, you're not finished it yet, right?
I think I'm like basically just on the precipice. I was trying to finish this and Goodbye Volcano High before today. I've played like 3 hours and 40 minutes and change.
What percentage are you at? Do you know?
I don't off the top of
So
my
when
head, to
you
be honest.
load-
Without getting spoilers, I have a purple orb and I've
Got
done
it.
a lot of stuff with it.
You're probably
So-
like 2/3 to 3/4 of the way
Okay,
through.
that's about what
Yeah.
it felt like. But yeah, I absolutely adore it so far as well. I agree with everything y'all have said. I think the word I keep coming back to is elegance when I think about this game. It is a masterclass in game design, and to your point, Joseph, about like the way it like teaches you new abilities and kind of leads you through things. I think it's just so clever and so thoughtful in the way it guides you through the world. And we talk about, I feel like, especially in years of like From Software titles and all this stuff, games not prompting you and guiding you through things have been like a hot button discussion of like how this game does it well, how this game kind of sets the player up for failure. This game strikes the perfect balance between giving you environments and directing you along a path, but not feeling so intrusive of like, here's the button prompt of this is how you do it. Like, there's a lot of self-discovery in this game, but it's like the way the game is paced and the levels are designed are in such an approachable way that just feels really really nice to progress through. And I think it strikes the perfect balance. The only other puzzle game I can think of that I felt this similar about is Portal, in a sense that like I enjoyed the moment-to-moment gameplay. I never felt stupid, and when I solve puzzles, it's always a moment of celebration, jubilance, just really good vibes. But I also was very, very impressed with just the overall the animations, the transitions, to get into the visuals a little bit. Like, I think to your discussion of like hitting on that Playdead style, Joseph, I think this like elevates it in a really interesting way. And yeah, incredibly special game. When we're talking about indie bangers, like, this has skyrocketed up my top 10 list, and I think this is a game that we will be talking about for a long time, because I think puzzle games like take notes, because this is very, very well done.
Yeah, the world building reminded me a lot of like Denis Villeneuve's movies. So think Arrival, Blade Runner. That's
Dune.
what I think about.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking
exactly.
that too. Yeah,
with the colors, and because there are different worlds. This is something you've seen in the trailer. Each one was distinct, not only from color palette, but the way that the environments were built, whether it was like a deserty level or more of a swamp level. They all had their own character. And I tend to agree with you, Luke, that this is one that will be on my list of top 10 games of the year. And when we think about puzzle games, it'll be on the list of like the 10 puzzle games you have to play now. It'll be on there.
Yeah.
I think that my favorite part about this game is like, whenever I play any game, right, there is a separation between like the experience and the gameplay, where I want the gameplay to be as intuitive and polished and snappy as possible. Like, whether that could be this game where, like Jacob said, it's one button, it's A, and yet you're doing such a wide variety of things in this game. I think that's absolutely incredible. And it's kind of like, okay, what if they expand it to 2 buttons next game, right? Like, how much does that open up the scope in terms of what they allow you to do? But also, like a game like Sekiro, where you have a ton of buttons and you're pressing all sorts of combinations to parry and attack and all that stuff, but it feels right? Like, I want it to feel right immediately, and in Cocoon, it does. But there's also the gameplay aspect where I don't necessarily want it to feel right at the beginning. Like, my favorite games are games where I just don't know what's going on, or every step around the corner, there's something new that appears that you're like, oh, wow, this kind of changes everything I've learned up to this point. And now my perspective on what may be happening or how to play the game changes. I think of last year, Inscription is definitely one where you're kind of plopped in and you're like, what is this game? And every, achievement you get, it kind of opens up the game in a different way. And Tunic is the same way as well. You kind of start bare bones, and the more you play, the world builds out and you learn more about this game. You're like, whoa, this game is a lot deeper than I expected. I think Cocoon gets, I would say 95% there for me, where the gameplay and the mechanics are probably a 10 out of 10, where you're like, oh my God. Like by the end, Jacob, I know you know what I'm talking about, where I'm like, this is I thought the game was over halfway through. Like I was texting my buddy, our Sandshot Player Podcast, and I'm talking to him like, yeah, I think I'm about at the end of the game. And I finished this section. I'm like, huh. I guess I'm not at the end, and I played for like a couple more hours after that. But having it keep one-upping itself to the point where you're I'm I don't even know anymore. We've already surpassed where I thought this game was going to stop impressing me, and we're a couple levels above that. So the only criticism, and I always like to throw in a criticism to let everybody know, hey, I don't think this game is perfect. There are some flaws.
You can't pause on the criticism, can you?
I can't pause on the criticism. My one minor criticism is I do think the game is maybe a tad bit abstract. I would have liked a little more bones to chew on as I got deeper into the game. Whereas when I finished it, I felt like I got a satisfying enough answer. Whereas I feel like when you look at a game like Inside or Little Nightmares, when I finished those games, I was like, I cannot believe where this finally took me. Cocoon had a similar thing, but I feel like if I just had a couple more tidbits of explanation in there, it would have been a little more enjoyable to wrap up everything, right? It's a little more satisfying when you have the clues and you're like, it was all right there. That's amazing. This, I'm kind of like, yeah, it was there for sure, but you really, really got to dig. It wasn't right in front of my face. So.
Yeah, I think when I was done the game, I very much just went, yeah, okay. Yeah. I was very satisfied, and I'd sort of, because the game essentially, if you look at walkthroughs, it's done in percentages. So essentially when you load in, it's it tells you exactly how far you are through your playthrough. And in the last 5%, by then I was just I've sort of experienced everything I need to experience with this. And the end didn't disappoint. It just, I was just at the end, I was like, yep, this is a satisfying experience. In the end, just check the box for me. You don't come here for the world and the story they're building. It's really just how you get to that end point.
Yep, exactly.
Do you all think your expectations played into that at all in terms of how the ending impacted you, Joseph? Maybe specifically for you, because you referenced other Playdead games. Did you have that man, I want this to top Inside level expectation, or for? So I'm just curious as someone who hasn't finished it yet.
Yeah, I will say, in a way, I'm always looking for that. I'm always looking for the next big impact, but I think. In this case, I feel like the game did it to itself. If I'm being honest, because as I'm playing it, there's such a lack of clues and hints, and there are little things, little tiny snippets to kind of understand what's going on. But for the most part, it's such devoid of clues that I'm like, well, there has to be some big explanation as to what the hell this game is about. Because it's in the light, this isn't even really a spoiler. In the background, you're just seeing random creatures or things, just kind of in the background in these alien settings, and you're just what are these guys? What are these things? What are they doing? Where am I? And you're just kind of I must be building up to getting some answer. And the longer you go, you just keep thinking, there must be there must be some answer. So getting to the end and being yeah, that's an answer. Okay, cool.
Fair enough.
I like I said, I'm not saying it is bad by any stretch of the means, but when I compare it to my favorite games, I would say that's the only aspect where I didn't feel the same rush of excitement in terms of the overall package.
Yeah, that's fair. It's worth noting for folks that are interested in picking this one up. It's available on Game Pass. You can also play it on Steam, Switch, and PlayStation. So literally everywhere. Highly recommend. This is the first game in a long time where while I was playing it, I was like, you ever play a game where you're like, this is a classic, or you're like, this is, I haven't had that in a minute. So it was kind of cool to be like, whoa, I feel on the ground floor of something that really hit for me. So I'm excited to finish it off, excited to talk more about it. I'm sure we'll bring this one up during Game of the Year convos. But let's kick it over to Jacob. You played a couple recent releases. Do you want to tell us about My Friendly Neighborhood?
Yeah, before I do that quickly, I just want to say that to your point, Joseph, you brought up Dave the Diver earlier and said how much you loved it. It's probably the best game I've played this year, to be honest. But to your point, Luke, I haven't felt this way about an indie since Inscription. So I just want to give the +2 to Cocoon.
Heck yeah.
It's going to be very high on our list. My Friendly Neighborhood. This is a Dread XP published joint. Essentially imagine an indie Resident Evil game with sort of the aesthetic of a Five Nights at Freddy's is sort of the way that I pitch this game. You are asked to go and figure out, you go to a TV station within the game and you're a repairman, and essentially there's an errant signal going on at this TV station that's playing an old school Sesame Street-like puppet-driven television show for kids.
Love it.
And then you find out that, the puppets have taken over the TV station, and it's your job to go to the roof to figure it out. It's a Resident Evil game very much because you have to find keys to get doors and then go to different parts of this environment to essentially eventually get your way onto the roof. Jess and I played this one together. In-game time, we played for about 6 hours, but I think we ended up playing for about 10 because this has the things you like about a Resident Evil game, but also some of the things that I think are quite antiquated from some of the older Resident Evil games. So the save system, for example, you need to find coins in the world to be able to save. So on more than one occasion, Jess and I didn't have enough coins to be able to save, so we would play for longer than we probably should have, and got killed by one of the puppets, and would have to go back 45 minutes and just replay a section that we'd sort of lost in. But the world and the puppet design I find was pretty cool. There's maybe about half a dozen puppets, and they're each very distinct, and they sort of just walk around, and even if you shoot them with your alphabet gun, yes, you shoot like a typewriter ass gun at these puppets. They're saying kid phrases to you, like eat your vegetables, and that's not a line in the game, but that genre of thing. And sometimes even when you shoot them, you may use tape to tape them up, because if you leave the room and then come back, they'll basically come back to life. So you can duct tape them to the wall or the floor so they don't really come back to life. And it's just fun to walk through the world sometimes, and then you just hear a children's puppet saying stuff tied up on the floor. The world and the aesthetic is great. The gameplay is serviceable. I think you'll just have to deal with a lot of the annoyances of old Resident Evil games if you want to play this.
Right on. So, go ahead, Joseph.
I was gonna just ask, in terms of the world, is there a active story, or is it kind of just they set up the story and you're kind of learning things, and then maybe there's a resolution? How does that are there NPCs kind of guiding you through? What's the experience there?
Yeah, so much of the puppet's perspective is told via a sock puppet that pops up almost like the little sisters in BioShock, through pipes, and is actually voice acted, if you know the YouTuber Arlo, the blue puppet voiced by Arlo from the YouTube. So the voice acting is very good for that character who sort of leads you through. And then there are not diary entries or newspaper clippings that you find through the world that sort of share why the world is the way it is and what happened to My Friendly Neighborhood. There was a war. People didn't want this TV show anymore. It got taken off the air, and then the puppets sort of revolted is the overarching story. So I would say that, and then there's obviously within certain environments too, there's usually like a big bad that sort of roams around. Like at one point there's a big bird type character that's actually just like a giant puppet flamingo that doesn't attack you, but essentially like may walk over you or is just like peering in certain areas of the level, looking for her glasses, wildly enough. So there's like great character designs for some of that stuff, and you get some of the stuff in the world, but to your point, Joseph, like this story isn't gonna like, it's not like Five Nights at Freddy's level of lore that Matt Pat talks about for 20 videos and we're getting a movie. It's serviceable enough.
Is it scary? Or is it more campy kid comedy vibe? Like, what's the age range on this one?
Yeah. Apart from one section at the end, there's nothing that's really, like, truly, truly scary. Okay. There are some jump scares in that, like, the puppets will attack you, and if they get too close, the melee combat's really only okay in this thing. You get a wrench, and it's sometimes hard to, beat up a puppet with a wrench. But they will jump at you and sort of like knock you over. So I wouldn't say this is a game for children by any means, but like, anyone 13 or up could probably play this one. I bet it's rated T. It's just occasionally you get the occasional jump scare in this one.
Fair enough.
So interesting story.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my mom used to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
And there was a spinoff called Angel.
Okay.
Right? And Angel was a character in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, whatever. He had his own TV show.
David Boreanaz plays or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. There's an episode where they go to a studio, like a PBS type studio, and there are puppets demonic puppets that are turning people into evil puppets, and they basically are like, we want to kill everybody, and they're saying all this weird demented stuff. And that traumatized me as a kid. I was like, this is so scary. It wasn't I wasn't having nightmares about it, but it definitely I thought it was cool and creepy, and probably for adults they were probably like, oh yeah, this is dumb and fun or whatever. But that episode stuck with me to this day. It's probably been 2 decades almost since I've seen that. So I asked the guy who I played the demo at PAX East. Asked the developer if there was any inspiration from that, because it's very similar. He said no. But long story short, I was like, man, this could be some really, really interesting lore if the puppets are there's something really weird and sinister going on with these puppets. Is there any big plot twist, or is it just kind of hey, these puppets were always real life creatures in this world and now they're just kind of evil? Or is there any plot twist or interesting thing to look forward to?
I would say that there's a small twist in the last sort of 30 minutes of the game that flips the story on its head just a little bit. But I'd say very much this is just more about exploring, seeing the big characters, and not really about the story in itself. It reminds me a lot of Hello Neighbor in aesthetic, and the sort of scary vibes in it. So I actually looked up the ESRB rating because I was curious. It's T. It's not an E-rated title. But no, it's not. The story won't blow your socks off. There's a twist or two, Joseph. But if you're really looking for Five Nights at Freddy level lore here, you're not going to get it.
One other question. When I played the demo, I was in this little, I think the neighborhood with the flamingo.
That's the big bird character. Yes.
Yeah. Do the areas change up drastically, or is it all kind of similar looking?
They do. So there's a couple of different areas. There's an office building. There's sort of the TV sets that are in there. We've got sort of a greenhouse aviary style. We've got the sewers. So there's a relative amount of variety in there, and they really feel, for an indie title, they feel really lived in. So I gave it a 7.5 out of 10 on my review, because I wrote a review for thegamingbrief.ca, which is my little site for reviews. So it's something in my mind that if you are a fan of this genre of game, you must absolutely play this one. But I don't want to say buyer beware, but this game will definitely not be for everyone. It's great for spooky October.
Yeah, I was gonna say I might check this out. We'll see. I've been on the hunt for Claire and I always like to play a couple spooky season games. We did Costume Quest a couple of years ago. That was really fun together, and things like that are fun to sprinkle in.
I played this on Steam Deck, plugged into my TV, and I experienced like a weird issue with respect to exposure and brightness, where everything just either seemed dark, or if you cranked up the exposure and the brightness, everything was just blown out. But
got it. Okay.
It ran really well on Steam Deck, so I think this is a good candidate for your list, Luke.
Nice. Very cool.
Another tangent. This will probably take a second.
Hooper in, let's go.
How do you, when you hook your Steam Deck to your TV, do you have like a Bluetooth controller plugged in, or what's that situation?
Yeah, so I ended up
getting connect it directly to the Steam Deck, right?
Yeah, so I ended up getting there's a Genki dock, I believe, which is essentially just like a plug that's got HDMI and power in it. So that's how I'm hooked up to my TV. I'd recommend this Genki dock. It works really well, and it's like $40. It's great to even pack in a suitcase. Like if you want to bring your Steam Deck with you, if you're at a hotel, you can just easily plug in. And I've got an 8-bit Do controller as well, which works really well. Nice. I don't have the Switch version because there's two versions of the controller. There's the Switch version that has the Switch style buttons, which like, I don't know, for some reason the Switch style controls with the A and B being flipped on Steam Deck, like it broke my brain. So I ended up returning that and getting the regular one, and it works really well.
Wireless?
Yeah, it's the 8-bit Do like Pro controller, and it feels exactly like a Nintendo Pro controller, except it's got like Xbox style controls.
I like that.
And you can connect an Xbox controller Bluetooth to a Steam Deck too.
Yeah,
just throwing that out there. Because
you can. I just hate the D-pad on the Xbox controller. So
fair.
like, I was playing Dave the Diver, and I'm like, man, this D-pad sucks. And so I ended up getting the 8-bit Do, which has a great D-pad.
Man.
Right on. Yeah, I haven't done it personally, but I noticed a lot of devs at PAX for like additional screens had like Steam Deck on a stand on their table with Xbox controller, which was a nice option. So good stuff. Jacob, you have one more game that you played recently, 30XX. This one's been on my radar for a while. I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, so this is the sequel to 20XX. This from Battery Staple, I believe is the name of the dev. It is a Mega Man X roguelike game where, very much like Mega Man X, where you have 8 bosses and, a final boss, gather their powers, get to the end, except you can play it in a roguelike mode. For me, I'm a baby when it comes to video games, so I definitely played in the game's Mega Mode, which takes out the permadeath element of it, where like if you die in a run, you just like keep all the power-ups you have and all the powers you have, because I wouldn't be able to beat it. Like it's pretty difficult, but it is the first, because I've played stuff like Mighty Number 9, and Mighty Number 9 is just like not what I'm looking for when I'm playing a game like that. This one, the controls were just exactly like a Mega Man game. They were like pixel perfect. The music was dope. The graphics were dope. The level design was cool. There was a bit of variety and randomness in the actual level design, where there are like crafted blocks in the world that are sort of varied as you play it. But no, this one's super dope. Not to bury the lead, my review's on 61indie.com. Shout out to the crew over there for letting me write words on that website. But this one's really great. It's been in early access for a while. It's now on PC and Switch. Another one I played on Steam Deck, and you can play as either a character like Proto Man, if you know the Mega Man games, that has a sword, or you can play as a character that very much is an analog to Mega Man that has like a blaster that works just like Mega Man. This one's super dope, especially if you're okay with games with a little bit of difficulty. This one is one that you should most definitely check out. It came out about a month ago on PC and then just hit 1.0 on Switch. I'd highly recommend this one.
Let me ask you something, Jacob.
Yes, of course.
Have you played Dave the Diver?
I have.
So where does, now that you seem to have played all the bigger indie titles this year, with exception of Sea of Stars, I guess.
Yeah.
Where does this rank?
This game may not be in my top 10 for the year.
Okay.
Well, just for indie games.
Just for indie games? It's probably a top 4 indie game, because I think about like Dave the Diver and Dredge are definitely there. And then Cocoon comes after that. And if you told me like after that top 3, 30XX might be right after that.
Okay.
It's pixel. Okay. It really just, a game that just feels really good to play. This one just is perfect. The controls just, you never do anything in the game that your controller doesn't like tell the game to do. And I know that sounds like dumb when I say it out loud, but it's just, it just is so finely tuned, and all the power-ups are great. And the thing that you don't get in a Mega Man X game is as you collect powers from the bosses, you can actually fuse those powers together and create an entirely new set of powers. So you have 8 powers from bosses that then you can create 30 fusion powers that use like different levels of your power each time you use them. So
I like that.
This just looks like good gaming comfort food, you know what I mean? Of like the genre, the art style. How's the music? It looks really...
It's dope. It's super dope. Like, all you need to do is listen to the opening song, and it'll bang. The soundtrack is from... I'm gonna give credit to the soundtrack here while we're talking, because the musician that did the soundtrack, this game could have been a SNES game or like a Genesis era. Like,
love that.
Maybe not Genesis, but maybe like PS1, Super Nintendo. Like, it fits in that era incredibly well.
Nice. Yeah, this one's been on my radar. I feel like, not to say I don't mean this in a negative way, but like, I feel like this is a known quantity, if that makes sense. Of like, I know what this is, and when I want a game like this, I will definitely be picking it up to play, but it doesn't feel like a must play for me right this second, amidst the crazy busy season we're working our way through.
Yeah, it's the soundtrack's from City Fires is the name of the artist, and it's fantastic. And I'm totally with you, Luke. Like, this is not like, it's not something I would put over Dredge or Dave the Diver or Cocoon, but it's something that, like,
if you
put
want
it on your
this
wish
type
list,
of game, like, this is 100%.
Put it on your wish list, and like the minute it drops by 20% or 30%, like, this thing is truly, truly, truly a must buy for fans of the genre.
Good stuff.
Luke, you played a video game that I'm very curious about. I played the demo at PAX East. Goodbye Volcano High. Did you love it?
I did, actually.
Okay.
Which, to be honest, was kind of surprising. I've played several visual novel, kind of narrative-focused games this year, and kind of been underwhelmed by most of them, if not all of them. I was a little skeptical going into Goodbye Volcano High, just because I enjoyed what I played at PAX, but it's kind of tricky to play like a narrative-focused game demo in that convention setting. So I just wasn't sure how it would hit once I sat down with the full game. And there's some quirks to it early on, specifically with the rhythm game aspects of the game that you kind of have to get a handle on to really feel comfortable playing. But once I got that under my belt, I really vibed with the characters. I thought the music and art style were fantastic, and I think the narrative is a fun twist on the classic, like, let's do a coming-of-age tale in gaming. So for folks that aren't familiar, Goodbye Volcano High is developed by a studio called Co-op. It is a narrative rhythm game, all centered around teenage dinosaurs as they experience the end of the world with a meteor coming to essentially decimate the population.
Not a spoiler. It's in like the first 10 minutes of the game.
And the game is called Goodbye. Yeah, this is the setup. And so I thought that premise in it itself was very interesting. And I love dinosaurs. And as quirky as it all sounds, I think the game does a lot of really nice things to be intentional and thoughtful, and have commentary on mental health, and kind of delve into some darker themes that I wasn't necessarily expecting. So this felt a lot more than a surface level pass at kind of this premise. I thought it was really well executed, and I thought each of the characters by the end were all really compelling in their own ways, and it's funny, it's fun, and I think the music is really a standout for this year for me. So, and to compare it to I know last year, Jacob, you and I both played We Are OFK.
What's it called now? It's called something different now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they ended up changing. So the name of the band is still OFK, but they actually changed the name of the game to sort of reflect it. It's now called, I think, Pop Love Panic is the name of the actual game itself.
Okay.
But the band is called
Pop Love
OFK.
Panic.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I missed that one. That said, I think that's the closest analog to this one. But for me, I think the rhythm gameplay of the music sections and the impact your narrative choices have in this game made this more of a game experience than We Are OFK, I felt like was a like interactive, light visual novel experience, whereas I would say this is a narrative game. You're doing things, you're playing the rhythm game mechanics, and making choices that matter, and different things. So I would give this game the edge for sure.
I have a question that's related to dialogue, because I always, when I think of games like this, I think of Life is Strange, and how the first Life is Strange was made by like a French dev, like from France, and like it's almost like they're like, it was really great, but some of the dialogue was like, hey, we watched the OC once and we kind of wrote dialogue that was likened us to like One Tree Hill and the OC. Does this game have that same problem where sometimes the dialogue makes you cringe a little bit?
Yes, I wouldn't say it's a consistent thing, but any teen-focused narrative drama has a few moments, but I wouldn't say it cringes because it's bad writing. It cringes because it's like, when you're a teenager, you do things that are cringe. You know what I mean? So I the writing worked for me, generally speaking, and I think that the dinosaur end of the world angle kind of give it some originality that help it along the way.
How queer is this game?
It's very open with it, and it's great. Sorry, I didn't mean to like deer in headlights in that question. I just like hadn't really thought about it. I guess I hadn't really thought about it because the game just treats it as like a very open, fluid.
The perfect way to
can
treat
be
it.
what you want. It doesn't like call it out in a like weird, obstructive way. It's just very like, this is a great vibe. It's natural. It feels authentic. Well, yeah, it was great.
And then as a fan of indie rock, like, does the soundtrack bang? Because it reminded me a lot of the Beaches.
Yeah, this would be one that, like, if they dropped a vinyl next week on Limited Run or I Am 8-Bit, I'd totally pick it up because really enjoyed the music a lot. And the rhythm game elements, too, I thought by the end I was, like, hilariously, like, on the edge of my seat, like, because if you nail the rhythm game elements, it, like, helps you narratively in the story, so I'm like, I'm gonna get a 90% on every performance because I want to get these story moments with the characters.
So, I played this demo at PAX East, and going into the demo, I was very excited. Coming out of the demo, I was less excited for myself, just because this is not really my type of game. I'm not really a visual novel guy. And there is one exception, all right? When the drama is there. I need intense drama, though.
Are you about to say Degrassi? Is that what you're doing right now?
I'm trying to figure out how to get it in there.
Just say
Degrassi is a high school. Volcano High is a high school. Luke, you haven't seen Degrassi, so I can't ask you to compare it to that. Or have you?
I've bits and pieces, you know what I mean? Episode here or there.
Don't worry, we'll figure that out later.
Okay.
But where is the drama? Because, like, for comparison, right, I look at Life is Strange True Colors, and that was a game that I was not really interested in. Like, when we talk about games where we're talking about everyday life and just random town, pardon my French. Can we cuss on this podcast? I don't remember. Should we not?
I do, and I'm the editor of the podcast, so I think it's fine.
Cuss away, brother.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, small town shit, I don't really care for.
Sure.
But Life is Strange had such great emotional beats and drama that I was sucked in.
Yeah.
How is this more like, hey, we're kind of all friends, but, you know, Tracy doesn't really want to be in the band anymore, X, Y, and Z? Or is it like, holy shit, we see the meteor, like, we need to figure this stuff out? Like, where are we on the radar, on the scale?
Sure. I think it's kind of in the middle ground of, like, I would put Life is Strange True Colors at, like, peak narrative storytelling, making you genuinely invested in these really authentic characters, interesting side stories, like intriguing mystery that makes you want to keep going. Like, there's like such layers to that game that like really surprised me. I wouldn't put Goodbye Volcano High on that same level, but I think it's solid. I think there is some intrigue. There are some cool character dynamics. There is the like stereotypical like, oh, she doesn't want to be in the band anymore character. But I think they play off of those tropes in some different ways, and I think the end of the world angle really helps a lot of that. It was really interesting playing this in a like semi post-pandemic world, whatever we live in right now, because there's kind of some interesting parallels to the developing COVID-19 crisis with this end of the world meteor element, in a sense that like at the beginning of the game you hear that a meteor, an asteroid is coming. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Oh, it's a joke. Let's make light of it. What does that mean? Very similar to like January or December of 2019, January of 2020, when there was just so much uncertainty about COVID. It was just like this unknown, like, who the heck knows what's going on? So I think they play on those narrative ideas in some interesting ways. And I just genuinely liked the characters. I think about a game that Jacob and I reviewed several months back, Stray Gods, and how there were so many moments in that game narratively where I just felt bored.
Woof. Yeah.
And I didn't ever feel bored in Goodbye Volcano High, but there were story beats where I was like, I know where this is going. This is this character archetype. But there were also moments that surprised me. So I think it's long-winded answer. It's in that middle ground, but I think it's solid. I don't know if for folks like you, Joseph, that like generally don't really vibe with narrative, like this type of visual novel narrative game, I don't know if this one like transcends that genre, but I think for folks who like a kind of strictly narrative experience or a music game, I think this is definitely worth checking out.
Is this going to hit your list, do you think?
I could see it being on the lower half of my list, like a number 10, based on my experience. I cried at the ending, which I really didn't expect. And I say I don't cry often, but I feel like I've been saying that more and more often lately, so who knows what that means. Maybe I'm just at an emotional place in my life, but the characters really resonated with me, and the idea of like making art, making friendship, making something meaningful like before your untimely demise, like there's something relatable there that I thought was really special.
How's the game broken up? Like, are there chapters or like, because I know like in Life is Strange, there is kind of like the big cliffhanger at the end of the chapter to kind of keep you pushing. What's that driving force in this game?
Sure. So the narrative setup, it's broken up into 8 episodes. Each episode's roughly like 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how long you play it. I finished the game in about under 7 hours, so it's like that 6 to 8 hour narrative experience, which felt about right for this one. But the story setup, your main character that you play as, Fang, is in a band called Worm Drama with her 2 best friends.
Good. Very good.
You get to design the logos for the band. It's great. It's really charming. And they have an audition for a Battle of the Bands competition, which will lead them to play a like Coachella-esque music festival, potential record deal, this and that, fame and success. That's the goal. So for Fang, her goal is to like make it big as a musician, and then kind of the interplay of what each character wants out of life, because they're all seniors in high school. So there's this kind of interesting parallel of like, let's figure out college. What are we going to do with the rest of our lives? Also, the world might end. So there's this like play of like different characters are like super unmotivated. Different characters want to be surgeons. You know what I mean? Everything in between. And so there's kind of this push and pull of like, what is our future? How do we use the time we have left is kind of the driving force of like, there's not like an overarching mystery like Life is Strange. It's very much about the character relationships, the moments, the music. That's kind of the main driving force of the narrative, I would say.
There are choices though, Nespa.
Yes, yeah. So you have choices. They're very relationship based in terms of like, I am going to prioritize speaking to this person over this person, or we're having an argument about how to progress in the band. I am going to side with this character. I want to ignore this optional dialogue and go talk to these people instead, and that influences things. I didn't see like dramatic differences, but there were definitely impact in terms of like, I remember a kind of pivotal moment. Someone was waiting for me outside, and without thinking about it, I chose to stay inside for an extra 5 minutes, and then I went outside, and they were upset that I left them waiting, and that impacted things. So like little things like that I was like pleasantly surprised of like, oh, these choices do matter. There is some things happening behind the scenes. It's not just like tunnel vision, one direction, if you will.
Final question, kind of pulling this out. So this game notably got put on everybody's radar because it was in like a PlayStation State of Play, if I remember correctly, or I don't even remember. It might have been a showcase. But I'm curious from your perspective, right? These games don't often get the spotlight by the first party console makers or even third party publishers for the most part. I think of Doki Doki Literature Club. That was a big deal when it came to PlayStation, and it's very obvious why that one kind of stands out. Life is Strange is another one where I wouldn't consider it a visual novel, but that's because it is kind of like this 3D, we're moving around, interacting, kind of like a new take on the genre. Do you think there is anything particularly what do you think caught PlayStation's eye that put this visual novel in front of everybody as opposed to the dozens of others we find on Steam and whatnot?
I think the art style is really, really striking. It's really pretty. It feels like you're watching an amazing cartoon, hand-drawn, just lovely. And I think that dinosaur end of the world element really caught a lot of folks' eye, and myself included. And I think the PlayStation team probably saw a lot of value in coming-of-age tale. Everyone can relate, but also people love dinosaurs. And I also think there's a big push for music games to make a comeback, or music to be heavily involved in games. And I think that's an aspect I didn't touch on a whole lot, but I think the rhythm game elements of this game are quite good. It's a little wonky at the beginning. I played on PC initially with mouse and keyboard, but I quickly switched to controller because the rhythm game elements were kind of tricky to do on mouse and keyboard. So for folks that haven't played the game, essentially the gameplay hook is you're using the thumbstick to hold notes in different directions, and then they're using buttons to cue quick time events to the beat. The weird thing is that the quick time events to the beat don't actually feel like they're as on the beat as you would think. Like, it's not very precise, and it's a lot more like, I'm going to emphasize the offbeat. I'm going to emphasize this accent hit to get music theory nerdy. It's not like the thing you hear most prominently in your ear. So it's like, I had to really like focus in order to do well at the rhythm game elements, but it was cool to have a level of interactivity during the music sequences that felt meaningful. And it also felt like when I screwed them up, it impacted the narrative. Whereas I think back to, I'm sorry, I already forgot the new name for We Are OFK, but in that game, it's like very like ethereal. We're going to move objects in space just to make it look cool during the music. It didn't feel like it didn't feel like gameplay. It felt like I'm going to move this interactive painting. Mm-hmm. Whereas this was like, I am playing in a band right now. And that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think I'm curious. I don't know if I'll have time to play it before the end of the year because video games.
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely worth playing. I think for folks that have been excited about this one and had it on their radar, I would definitely recommend it. And if you enjoy a good narrative game, check it out.
Goodbye Volcano High.
Goodbye Volcano High. All right.
We round up the indie games, huh?
We rounded them up. So lots of games. If you want to find links to check these games out, they'll be in the show description. I didn't mention Goodbye Volcano High is on PS5, PS4, and on Steam. So a couple options there to play. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, y'all. Any closing thoughts? Anything to get off your chest before we sign off for the week?
I'll say this into a microphone because we said it
Sure.
before we started recording, but I started playing Pikmin 4, Luke, and all the things you've said about Pikmin 4 are absolutely right. Like, this is a dark horse.
It's very
very dark horse for me for the end of the year, to be honest.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, let me tell you guys a quick story that happened to me this past week.
Oh, please. Story time.
I went out to dinner with some of our friends, and I'm Venmoing one of our friends for dinner. I'm like, okay, I'm paying you for whatever we got, our hot pot. And I look at her Venmo and I'm like, who is this guy? What does this mean? And she was like, I think because it said that he was paying her for Pikmin. I'm like, Pikmin? What? And she's like, oh yeah, I bought Pikmin 4, beat it in like 2 days, and sold it to him, this random stranger. And I'm like, how dare you not tell me you had this game so I could play it first? Mm-hmm. What are we doing? And she was like, my bad. That was my chance. Now I'll probably not play Pikmin 4 this year. I had a chance. So
I will mail you my copy of Pikmin 4 so you play Pikmin 4. To be completely honest, it's like that good that like,
wow.
Just for the sake of like, I don't want another Sifu situation, a game of the year podcast, y'all. I want everyone to like have played the game that I am Dark Horse.
You mean a middling video game Sifu, right?
Oh, shut the fuck up! Man. Get out of here with your. I might bleep that one, but
Luke has one button and it's Sifu, and I saw the rage, brother.
That's true.
I respect everyone's opinion, and I know I'm in the minority on that one, but I think Pikmin is a much better game than Sifu. I'll be super clear. I enjoy the heck out of Sifu, but I recognize its flaws. Pikmin, I think, is like game design at its peak. We'll get into it, but it's a very good game.
Wow.
But, yeah. All right. Cool. Well, we are setting our status to away until next time, but until then, we have 3 things for you to do for us. Follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos. Send this podcast to a friend because that's how people hear about podcasts, and give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. It really, really helps. Any content things to plug, y'all? Other places folks can find you?
Yeah, I'll start and say we are doing an episode of the Left Behind Game Club about Super Mario Galaxy, which comes out tomorrow. It was edited... Oh, sorry, not Super Mario Galaxy, about Fallout 3 that was edited by Luke Lewis.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't edit a Galaxy episode.
Yeah, you didn't do that. It's Fallout 3. Luke edited it. It's myself, Katie Lesperance, talking for over an hour about Fallout 3. It comes out tomorrow, so you can check that out at leftbehindgame.club. And you can find me on the Twitter at Jacob McCourt, JACOBMCCOURT. Thank you.
Love it. Joseph, how about for you?
You guys can always check us out at PlayerPlayer at playerplayerpod.com. Player Video Game Podcast on all podcasting services. I should have more videos coming out soon on Can't Pause. Thinking about doing a video on Cocoon soon, and a video on another game, Lucid. I forgot the name.
Nice. From Black Mass Studios?
That's the one. That's the one. So stay tuned. We're starting to get into the season of best X indie games of the year. So I'll probably start putting those videos together and putting some new indie games on you guys' radar. So get ready for that. Excited
to see it. And you can find me at Lukewarm Lewis on all social platforms. You can listen to the Lukewarm Games Podcast every other week. And yeah, stay tuned for some end of the year content. Got some cool developer interviews coming up. Lots of fun happenings. With that, thanks y'all. Cheers and happy gaming.
Bye.